I don't know about you, but when I think comfort, I immediately think giant Snickers bar. Anyone else? Bit of a comfort eater? Yeah. For other people, it might be, I don't know, you've had a bad day, it might be the gin and tonic cupboard. Why do I feel my hand raising again for that one? Thank you, I see that hand. And some people are saying this year, they said, oh, have you heard this? They said, oh, I haven't got a chocolate advent calendar this year. I'm just opening cupboard doors and eating whatever's in there. There's lots of different things, aren't there? The kind of go-to, that's our comfort place. It's where we just go to when we've had a bad day, or it's just where we feel safe, we feel comfortable. There's people-pleasing, isn't there? You know, for some of us, we find comfort in what other people think of us and our reputation. Or for others of us, it might be relationships, it might be spending money, all these kind of things. I read recently, the smartphone has become the adult's transitional object, replacing the toddler's teddy bear for comfort and a sense of belonging. Ooh. So it's not that any of those things are wrong in themselves, is it? In moderation, any of those things, completely fine. It's just that if we're going to those things and thinking that that's all there is in life to comfort us, it's almost like they're kind of shown up to be counterfeit comforts compared to what God has for us. If we're holding those things, whatever they might be, think what they might be for you this morning, but if they're holding those things that we find comforting, our go-to place, our go-to thing, if we're holding that too highly, then we miss out on all that God has for us, this comfort that God has for us, which is thankfully so much more meaningful and so much more life-changing than any of those things. So firstly, I would say this morning, expose counterfeit comforts in your life. I would urge all of us this morning to think about what those things are in our lives. What's the thing that we take comfort in? What's the thing that we rely on? And that's fine. Most of those things are fine. But God does want infinitely more for us than those things. Biblical comfort it's deeper. It's more meaningful. It's more life transforming than any of those temporary things that we could want for or run to. And in this passage, God's comfort is promised to us, but right through the Bible, his comfort is kind of described to us. And as we look at those different passages and those different verses, we begin to build up a picture of what God's comfort is, and we realise it kind of shows up all the other stuff for what they really are. So Psalm 23, so well known, isn't it? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. What's that all about? A rod was used by shepherds, and it was used to count their sheep. It was used to guide their sheep. It was used to protect their sheep. It was used to rescue their sheep. And the staff was an instrument of support. It's a bit like going on a big country walk and grabbing a stick, you know, and you just walk the walk with a big stick and it helps you up the big things. Put those two things together, and you basically get that comfort is you reassure me. It's that deep reassurance that God is protecting you, that he's walking with you, that he's guiding you, that he's rescuing you when you need it. That's what God means by comfort. Or Psalm 119, may your unfailing love be my comfort. In the Old Testament, when the writers talked about unfailing love, or they appealed to God's kindness or his grace, what they really meant was his covenant love, his covenant relationship with them. So actually, he's saying, your unfailing love be my comfort. That is your love that you have shown to your people, the fact that you have chosen a people for yourself, and all the promises that you have made to them, to walk with them, and all the ways that you have proved yourself to them. That is my comfort. It's the comfort of being known by God, by being chosen by God, of him walking with us. That's what God means by comfort. There's also an element to God's comfort, which is an exchange. We see this a lot in Isaiah and Jeremiah. It's like we're to exchange our sorrows, our hardships, our worries, and in their place, he gives us something good in return. He comforts us in return if we're willing to do that exchange. He wants to give us gladness in the place of our mourning. He wants to give us comfort and joy in the place of our sorrow. This is his desire for us. This is what he wants to do for us. He wants to give us a crown of beauty in place of ashes, the oil of gladness in place of mourning. He wants to give us a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. That's what God means by comfort. And into the New Testament, you know, we have the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn. What? Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Imagine how deep, imagine how transformational that comfort must be if you're blessed when you're mourning because of the promise of his deep comfort. That's what God means by comfort. And there's an eternal element to God's comfort as well. You know that passage in Revelation 7, and he says, and he will wipe away every tear from their eye. That's not like a sort of, oh, you know, here's a box of tissues because you're crying. This is an eternal wiping away of every tear we've ever cried about anything that has harmed us or those we love in this life. It is an eternal wiping away of those tears, an eternal comfort. That is what God means by comfort. So think about those things in your life that comfort you, and I'm sure they're fine. But maybe this morning think about just having them in their rightful place. And don't miss out on the deep, transformational comfort that God has for you. Because compared to that, these things are counterfeit comforts. They don't really deliver in the way that God's comfort can. Because it reaches down into our darkest places and it brings us holy reassurance, that reassurance that he's with us, that he's got his eye on us, that he's walking with us, that he's going to rescue us if we need it. It can bring a divine gladness, an unfailing covenant love. Thank you, Lord, that that's what you have for us, no matter what we're facing. Expose counterfeit culture and comforts in our lives and realize what God's deep comfort is for us. And the second thing we should do once we've done that is to receive God's comfort for ourselves. Receive God's comfort. Is anyone playing a game of Secret Santa this Christmas? Anyone involved in Secret Santa? A few hands. Okay. So I've played Secret Santa lots of times, and more recently I've played it in a new way. I'll share this with you in case you want to take this into your office Christmas party. This is what we did at the Christchurch staff team last year, isn't it? Our office Christmas party. And this is what we're doing again this year. Okay, it's called Santa Steal. So everybody buys a present, but they don't know who it's for. It's just a generic present for anyone. Put them all under the tree. The first person takes the present, opens it, sees what it is. Lovely. Thank you very much, whoever it was. Next person to open a present takes the present, and they've got the option now, once they've seen what the first present was, of either opening their present, or you've got it, steal the first present and give them that present. But the first person is not allowed to receive that present till they've given theirs. And so it goes on, and there's usually some fairly popular presents, and there's a lot of stealing going on by the time you get to the end of it, and it's lots of fun. So if you ever wondered what the Christchurch staff team do at Christmas, we do Santa Steal. But it kind of reminds me that in life there's a bit of that going on as well. You can't actually receive something sometimes unless you've given over something else, unless you've got rid of something else, unless you've handed that over, unless you've dropped it, unless you've made space. You can't necessarily receive the new thing. And I wonder for us this morning whether there's something about, we should all be receiving from God. Receiving his comfort, yes, receiving his love, receiving his forgiveness, receiving his spirit, receiving all that he has for us. And I just wonder whether some of us are holding on to stuff, holding on to these other presents, and we can't actually receive from God until we hand this other stuff over. So I wonder whether for some of us actually it's doing, this incessant doing. And probably if you're this kind of person, it's not necessarily doing stuff for yourself, it's probably doing stuff for other people. And that comes from a good heart and it comes from a great place. But incessant doing sometimes needs to stop, and you need to receive from God. And I'm firm on that this morning because I say it to myself as well. We need to stop constantly doing, constantly having in your head what the next thing is to do, ticking things off your to-do list in your head. I know stuff needs doing. I know at this time of year there is a lot to do and you want to tick things off your list. I know I am utterly that kind of person as well. But we need to stop and receive from God. Hand that stuff over. Find a time in your day when you lay that stuff down and you receive from the Lord. Receive his comfort. Receive his promises over your life. Receive his spirit, his life-giving spirit that you need. This is Advent. This is time to pause. This is time to prepare. This is time to reflect. If you're a constant doer, then stop, please, and find some space to receive from the Lord. And for others of us, we might be stopped from receiving from him by a narrative that we live under. This is a really hard one to conquer, I think, because this will be something that we just see as true. It's kind of like a lens we see the world through, and that's really hard to see when that's not true because we believe it is true for ourselves. So it might take the words of a kind and honest friend to speak that to you. But some of us just hold on to a narrative, and it's an unhelpful one. And maybe it's time to drop that narrative, place it to one side, and instead you pick up God's narrative over your life, which is his purposes for you and the great plans he has for your life and the high regard in which he holds you. Let God speak that narrative over your life. Give up the old one and receive the new one from him. It might be that actually some of us think we've been Christians for so long, we've been around church for so long, that we don't need to receive from the Lord anymore. It's like we think, we lead others to receive from the Lord. It's absolutely wrong. It's absolutely wrong. How can we lead other people to receive from the Lord unless we're receiving from him ourselves? If that's you, I would challenge you, just have a freshness about your receiving from the Lord. Have a new determination to meet with him, to receive from him. We can forget the basics of receiving God's love and his forgiveness and his comfort. And I would urge you this morning, get that back front and centre. Find a rhythm to your day. Find a rhythm to your life where you receive regularly from him. When was the last time that you utterly basked in the amazingness of knowing God and receiving from him? When we were on our church weekend away, apologies if you weren't there, I'm really bored of us talking about it, but we had a really great time. So on the Friday night, we had a time of worship, and it felt quite clear, I think, that most of us had arrived fairly sort of up for it. You know, we were ready, didn't want to waste any time, wanted to just go for it. We had a wonderful time of worship, and the band led us beautifully. And we were worshipping, and I had my eyes closed. And then towards the end of the time of worship, Tim got at the front, and he said something like, he's here. Jesus is here. And literally at that moment, I was facing the front, and there was a door here coming from the room next door. And as he said it, I saw Jesus walk through the door. I don't know what he'd been doing in the room next door, but he came through. I know it sounds weird when someone else talks about their experience of meeting with God. I know it sounds weird, but bear with me, because it was beautiful. And he walked in, and I saw him, and I can't tell you how beautiful it was. It was two things that I really received from him in that. And the first was that he was so calm. You know the state of the world right now, you know the state of our country, you know the state of your life, maybe. Listen, he wasn't there biting his fingernails worried. He wasn't panicking. Jesus was so beautifully calm. And the other thing that he was he was so gentle. So whatever it is that you're facing right now, and this whole thing about comfort, and you're thinking, yeah, I need comforting through this thing, whatever that thing is, be assured that he carries you through it so gently. It was absolutely beautiful, and I leaned into him and he leaned into me. And I remember that night when we all went off to bed, and we're in our room was all dark, and our boys were in bunk beds sleeping next to us, so we were just whispering, and I was trying to explain to Andy all about this. I was like, it was amazing, and he was there, and I saw him. I can remember saying to him, I said, I didn't want him to leave. I didn't want him to leave. And I was just reminded that we can't ever stop pursuing, meeting with God, with receiving from him. Don't let's think it's for someone else. Don't let's think we're past that. Don't let's think there isn't anything for us to receive. God has incredible doses of comfort and love and grace and forgiveness and strength and power for all of us to receive. We have to get ourselves in that place where we're ready to receive from him as frequently as possible. I remember, Lord, your ancient laws, and I find comfort in them, the psalmist says. That means the Bible. You know, I find comfort in the Bible. Just get the Bible out more, read it more, leave it open in the kitchen, on the worktop. Whenever you walk past it, there it is, calling you, drawing you in. Read it, listen to it, memorize it. This is the word of God, and he wants to give us comfort through it. Listen to this tucked away in Zechariah 1. So the Lord spoke kind and comforting words. Oh, who even knew that was in the Bible? The Lord spoke kind and comforting words. Let's make space. I can't hear his kind and comforting words unless I stop, unless I put my other stuff down and I receive from him. So determine to receive God's comfort for yourself. Never stop pursuing, meeting with him, receiving from him. He's so beautiful when we do. And finally, be the conduit for God's comfort. This passage clearly says that he's the Father of compassion. He's the God of all comfort, and he comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. And there's a beautiful picture later on in this letter where Paul describes exactly how this happens. He kind of lays it out. In chapter 7, he says, "For when we came into Macedonia, we had no rest. We were harassed at every turn, conflicts on the outside, fears within. But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us." How? By the coming of Titus. And not only by his coming, but also by the comfort you had given him. You see how that worked? So the Corinthians were comforted by God, and then they comforted Titus. And then when Paul needed it, Titus went, and he comforted him with the comfort he had originally received. that is actually God's plan. We are actually God's plan of how he wants to comfort this world. And boy, do we live in a society that needs comforting. I heard God does not comfort us to make us comfortable, but to make us comforters. And sometimes God will do that through meeting with us. And sometimes it really needs to be something tangible. You know, it actually needs to be. Jesus isn't walking tangibly the earth anymore, but he does it through us, doesn't he? And sometimes we're going to need to give someone a hug, take them a meal, cry with them, whatever it is. Sometimes it needs to be something tangible. I recently marked 10 years since my mum died. And I was 30 when she died, so it was before I got married or had children, so she's missed all of that. And she died very suddenly. And at the time when she died, I was working for a church in London, a great church, and we were about 5 or 6 weeks after Mum died, we went on a staff retreat, so we all went away. And after one of the sessions, I just fell apart, as you do. Completely fine, completely natural, normal stage of grief, and a safe place to do it, so that was fine. Now, one of the guys on our team was a guy called Barry Kissel, who some of you will know. Lovely little guy with a white beard. Sounded a bit like Father Christmas currently, isn't he? Anyway, Barry Kissel, a brilliantly prophetic guy, and he saw the state of me and he walked up to me. Now, on a good day, Barry Kissel walks up to you and he'll have a word for you, something pretty amazing. This was not a good day. I thought, Barry's definitely going to have something for me. So I'm sitting there and Barry walks up to me and he didn't say anything. He was just quiet. And then he picked up a lovely soft blanket that was sitting next to me. And he just unfolded it. And he wrapped it round my shoulders. And it wasn't until I felt the very tangible warmth and coziness and softness and comfort of that blanket. Only then did he pray God's comfort for me. It's like he knew I needed to feel it before I could then receive it. God chooses us to be his very tangible comfort to other people. Sometimes people need to feel something before they can receive it. And I would say it's up to us to take our place as the conduit for God's comfort. People come to Jesus in many different ways, and who knows that they might come to him through the comfort that you can very tangibly show to them by being a friend, by sharing his comfort with them. So I guess this morning it might be the challenge to really understand God's comfort, how deep this comfort is that he has for you. Maybe it might just expose something else in your life and think, you know what, I just need to put that in its place and not be so reliant on that thing. And I need to turn to God in those times instead. It might be the challenge to kind of hand something over, free up our hands so we can receive from him. So our lives would be full of those moments of, I don't want him to leave, I don't want him to leave, I don't want this moment to end. Hand the other stuff over so you're open, you've got hands free to receive from him. Or it might be that you've got people in your mind that you know that this week, you know what, you can be God's comfort to those people. They might just be drawn to Jesus because of the way you comfort them. He's the Father of compassion and the God of all compassion.